welcome back to another edition of Homemade. And today we are going to be making an ooey gooey pecan upside down cinnamon roll. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with our ingredients. We're going to use 1.5 cups of evaporated milk, 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, 1 tablespoon of honey, and also we are going to use that Imperial that you see on the counter. It is at room temp. We're going to use 4.5 cups of all-purpose flour, which include our 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 egg at room temp, and 1 packet of fast-acting yeast. Yes, this is fast-acting yeast. Now, our 1/2 cup of water, we are going to put it in the microwave to bring it up to temperature for about 45 seconds. And now we're going to add our sugar and our honey into this water, and this is just to proof our yeast, you all. We want to make sure that our yeast is active, so we'll go ahead and add in our tablespoon of honey. We're going to give that a quick stir just to dissolve the sugar and the honey before we put in our yeast. And once we dissolve that, we'll go ahead and put in our yeast. We're going to set that aside for about 10 minutes just to make sure that the yeast is active. And once we get that activation going, then we'll go ahead and start. Now, as you can see, our yeast is active. You see that foam that's there on the top, and once I pull it back, it lets me know that the yeast is good, so I can go ahead and use this. I will put it into my bowl, and if you'll notice, I am using my whisk attachment to begin. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put in half of my ingredients at a time. I don't want to put in everything, so I'll put in half of my flour mixture. I will go ahead and put in half of my Imperial afterwards. And remember, this Imperial is room temperature, so that means I'll put in about 4 tablespoons before I get to mixing it. Now, once I cut my mixer on, if you'll notice, it is not on high speed. My mixer is on medium at this point because I just don't want that flour to go everywhere. So if you'll notice, you all, I've put in my milk and I've also put in my eggs. Now, if you can see, the dough is starting to form, and I put in both batches, my first and my second batch. So I'm going to go ahead and take off my whisk attachment. Make sure that you pull every bit of dough that you can off of there. We want to make sure we get it all. So once I've taken that off, I'm going to go ahead and get ready to attach my kneading attachment. And this attachment is just going to knead the dough. That way I don't have to do everything by hand. The kneading attachment will work really well. And if you can see, I'm just going to go ahead and put it in. Now, whatever kneading attachment your mixer may have, that is perfectly fine. Now, I'm going to scrape down the sides, you all. You don't have to, but I like to, just to make sure I get it. So at this point, I did cut my mixer up to high speed, and I'm going to let that go for about 10 minutes. And if you can see, the dough is really starting to form. Now, this is a soft dough, you all. It is not hard. So as my dough is going, I'm going to go ahead and start with my pecan caramel filling. And if you'll notice, in that bowl, I did melt 1 stick of real butter. I'm going to go ahead and add in my cup of I'm going to go ahead and add in my cup of brown sugar, my tablespoon of vanilla flavor, and I'm just going to eye it. I'm not going to measure it. You'll also need 1 cup of Karo syrup, and you're going to put all this in and you'll mix it. Now, if you want to use a hand mixer at this stage, it is perfectly fine. I just chose to use a whisk because all we're trying to achieve is to make sure that the Karo syrup and the sugar is mixed in. Now, if you can see, it is already a lovely caramel color. Now, what you didn't see was I did spray my pan and my parchment paper with nonstick spray, and I just spread it out to make sure that it reached everywhere. Sprinkled on my pecans. No, I did not mix them in, but I did not use all of my pecans. So at this point, I'm going to set that aside. Once my dough is finished mixing, I am going to go ahead and start kneading it by hand. Now, this will take probably about 5 minutes, but also I do want you to notice I am going to use my bench scraper. Now, what I do want you to know that this is after the first rise. This means that I've set my dough in the warm place to rise, and I punched all my air out, and now I'm just going to go ahead and roll it out. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you get a large enough rectangle. You don't want it really thin, but you do want your rectangle large enough to where you'll be able to cut enough cinnamon rolls. Now we're going to go ahead and start working on our filling. Now, you all, this is a very soft stick of margarine. If you want to use real butter in this process, please feel free. And you're just going to use a butter knife or whatever you want to use to begin, just to make sure you spread the margarine evenly over that rectangle. And be careful, you all, because you don't want to tear your dough. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead, and once I've spread it out, I'll put my knife down and I'll spread it out with my hands a little more. I'm going to go ahead and put in my other filling, which was 1.5 cups of brown sugar and 4 tablespoons of cinnamon. Now I'm going to go ahead and put those pecans that I had reserved on there, and it is now time to start rolling our dough. I do want you to notice that we are going to roll the dough towards us, not away from us. And if you have a bench scraper, I will say it does come in handy at this point. Also, when you are rolling your dough, you do want to make sure that your apron or your shirt isn't touching your dough as you're leaning over. So you're just going to roll that and try to roll it as tight as you possibly can, because you do want to have those extra rolls in that cinnamon roll. Once I'm done rolling, I like to go ahead and tuck my ends. If you want to cut them off, that is perfectly fine. And we are going to go ahead and start setting our rolls inside our pan. I like to go ahead and just measure them off. I should be able to get 12 rolls in this particular pan. So just to make sure, I did go ahead and measure off 12 rolls before I started cutting them. Now, if you'll notice, I am going to set my cinnamon rolls in the pan, but I'm not going to set them directly next to each other. I do want them to have enough room to expand. They are getting ready to go in for the second rise. I've covered them with my tea towel. This second rise took about 10 or 15 minutes, and I went ahead and just cut my oven on to preheat while my rolls were in there. I took the towel off and put them on preheat. So now that they're done, I'm going to flip them over. And you all, if you'll notice, my cookie sheet is larger than my pan. The cinnamon rolls cool for about 5 minutes, not longer, because I still want to be able to achieve that caramel look once I pull my pan off. So here goes the moment of truth. We are pulling our pan off, and you can see it. The caramel filling is just running down. Now look at that, you all. Those are our caramel upside down pecan cinnamon rolls. They look so good. Now, if you want to put a little drizzle on, feel free. I did. And if you'll see, one of my cinnamon rolls is completely covered. Now, I want to go ahead and taste this. You all, this is amazing. Oh my goodness. Look at that cinnamon roll. And then I'm going to just show you how soft it is. Oh my goodness. You all, this is one of the easiest recipes that you will ever make. So, oh my goodness, the taste is out of this world. The taste is out of this world. I know I didn't say it earlier, but don't forget to like, subscribe, and share our channel if you want to keep seeing our easy homemade recipes. You all, cooking is as easy or as hard as you make it. I promise you, it is not complicated. Get the right recipe and make sure you keep it simple, be yourself, and I promise you, life in itself can be so much easier. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Homemade. And until next time, be great.